I'm really excited to say that my brother Jason came on and we recorded a Faith No More episode of the Worst of the Best podcast. The discussion was so big and so vast that it does not fit into one episode. So this is part one of that discussion. So this recording ends sort of abruptly because during the recording we didn't know that it's going to be a two-parter. We made that decision near the end of what will be part two. I just wanted to thank my brother again for coming on and guest hosting, and I can assume we'll hear a lot more of my brother Jason in the future. A worthy successor to my brother Ruben, I would say. Here you go, part one, Faith No More.
Welcome to the Worst of the Best podcast. You wanted the best. Well, they didn't freaking make it! So here's what you get. From Canada, Ryan and
Jason. Welcome, everyone, to the Worst of the Best podcast. I'm very excited today because with me, I have my brother. Now, don't get too excited. Ruben has not come back. I have three brothers, and this is my other brother, Jason. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ryan. Happy to be here. Happy to talk about Faith No More. I just want everybody to know that Ruben has way more podcasting experience than I do. And more specifically, he does have a face for podcasting more than I do. So,
yeah, so to be fair, Ruben's got a face for podcasting.
Yes, I don't.
But Jason, it's a privilege and an honor to speak with you because, A, you're my brother. And of course, we have a shared interest, as I did with Ruben, in many of the subjects that we cover. When you asked me, hey, Ryan, I know you need some guest co-hosting. Can I come on the show? And you acted a little miffed that I hadn't approached you earlier.
Yeah, well, I felt a little left out, a little hurt, a little stung. Yeah.
You're never left out, as it is with Ruben, as it is with you or all of my family. Family, the blood is thicker than water. You guys, anyone that's listening that is my relative, you always have an invitation to come on the show. And Jason, though, is also a listener of the podcast, so this is good.
Yeah, I'm one of the two.
Well,
so now we've just taken away one other download.
You're not going to let
one. Yeah, you'll get one download, Mom.
Yeah, so Mom and you. Ruben doesn't listen to the show.
Can you blame him?
No, I don't. I'm always surprised anyone does. And to those listeners, those few and far between that do listen to the Worst of the Best podcast, I do thank you for listening. And I suspect we'll get a bit of a bump with this episode because of the Worst of the Best podcast episodes, and I'll give a bit of behind the curtain here. The music ones are quite popular. They're the highest downloads. Generally, the music ones have been the highest downloads. Not every band, but of the top 5 downloaded episodes, they're all music-related topics. And that kind of goes without saying. Music is huge in the culture of the world. The bands that we've covered have tens of millions of album sales, and I would suspect some of those people listen to podcasts.
Music always lends to great conversation. People are either emotionally attached to a song or a band. It takes them back to places in their life that they like to reflect on. Helps them get through tough times, helps amplify the good times as well. So yeah, music, it just runs through our lives from when we're young, whether it's learning the alphabet or into our adulthood, and we can enjoy, music throughout our whole life. So yeah, I can understand why your music ones are more popular than the others.
And the second place is our conspiracy ones. We'll probably just make this a conspiracy / music episode. Oh, if we combine the two. Yeah.
Oh, yes. The Illuminati's involved in both of them. That's why they're popular, right?
That's true.
Illuminati's just all throughout the music industry, pushing their agenda.
Of course.
Which lends to the conspiracies.
That's right. No offense to the Illuminati, but, piss or get off the pot.
Let's do this already.
Yeah, I know. I love this. The slow burn control of the world. It's like this.
They're playing the long game, Brian.
Really.
It's completely 1,000-year game plan.
For to what end? To control the world, but I'm going to live and die, and it won't even matter to me. It's so funny. Like, what are we controlling?
Yeah, the person that started this Illuminati is like long gone.
But he died knowing his vision will one day come to fruition in the year 2530.
It is funny.
It is kind of funny. I do enjoy talking about them, and I do enjoy researching conspiracy theories. But at the end of the day, I always say to myself, it's a long game, like Jason said. And it's, where are we going with this? I don't have time. I don't have time to wait for this.
Yeah, I want to know how it ends.
They control the world. Okay. All right. Well,
and then what?
I don't know.
Yeah.
We're slaves. Slaves. All right. Here we go.
Yes, get it.
Jason, you're 46, right?
I am. Yep.
And I'm 44. And I bring that up because Faith No More has a long-lasting legacy that echoes today, and they're actually currently going on more tours right now as a band in 2020, which is amazing to me. I truly believe this with Ruben and Jason and myself, and a little bit of my oldest brother, Dion. We lived through a real golden era of music, of even from pop music to metal to rock and roll to movies. The 80s and 90s were just an amazing time of music, movies. Faith No More, when they entered the scene with The Real Thing, the album The Real Thing, even though we'll get into it, it was their third album. But that being said, when they entered our lexicon of the popular culture, it was 1989. I was 14 years old at the time, and you were 16. So for us as teenagers, Jason, we were so lucky to experience this Mike Patton joining Faith No More phenomenon live as it was happening.
Yeah. I mean, we were there, not their first two albums. Like you say, there are two other albums, but really it was the addition of Mike Patton that really helped push them into pop culture, into our everyday consciousness. He would have been the match to the fuel of the rest of the band, because it was just that perfect combination. His personality mixed with the music talents of the rest of the band was a perfect match. And you're right, we did hit an amazing period of music. Faith No More came in late 80s, early 90s. That was a transitioning time. We started getting the Stone Temple Pilots. You started getting the Pearl Jams. You got their Nirvana. It was a slightly changing musical time period. We're starting to leave a little bit of, in air quotes, the hair bands. And it was a little bit of a changing of the guard in that regards. We were able to experience all, and actually the popularization of rap was starting to come into the musical mix at that time. Faith No More was able to bridge a gap with a lot of these different genres of music, and it was the perfect timing for it.
I would say a lot of this is a bit of luck and timing. Isn't that the key to success in life? DNA and luck.
Right.
So Mike Patton had the DNA. The band members had the DNA to be talented musicians. They combined their talents to form the music they formed, and the luck then comes into play. Like the right people hear the right thing at the right time, and people catch onto it, and it becomes viral.
And not to snub Chuck, but there's no way, if you listen to their first two albums, there's no way that they would had the success with Chuck Mosley. There just would not have had that ability. No. I think his talents were limited. His lyrics would have been limited. It was just a completely different vibe bringing in Mike.
That's a discussion that I know a lot of avid and passionate Faith No More fans have. It's not quite as vitriol as the Sammy Hagar versus David Lee Roth debate, but there are definitely Chuck Mosley fans that are just Faith No More fans, and who followed Chuck's career after he was fired from the band, or when he left the band. And let me just do a disclaimer here so we don't get like a bunch of comments and stuff. Jason and I are not experts on the Faith No More history. We know a little bit here and there because we did live through it. So I want to give a bit of a plug, though, and I'm going to tag them in the release of this episode, so maybe they'll listen, because I do listen to their show. They're called The Podcast Croissant, and that's a play, of course, on the VHS release of their videos in 1993 collection, Faith No More Video Croissant. They are the primary, if not only, Faith No More podcast And they are absolutely in the mix. They know their Faith No More like I know my Rocky. It's probably the best way to explain that one. They definitely know Faith No More, and I love listening to them. They know the history. They know they're like an encyclopedia of the band. Jason and I are not going to.
I'm not going to pretend at all that I have that level of understanding. Just as an observer, as a fan of music, we have seen many concerts. I'm probably up in the hundreds of live performances. Sadly, Faith No More being one of them that I have not seen, that I have always wanted to. It just did not work out.
Jason and I lived through the greatest time of concerts. Like, for example, we saw the Black Tour. We saw like AC/DC's Razor Edge tour. We saw the Use Your Illusion tour with Izzy Stradlin still in the band. We saw Dr. Feelgood tour. I mean, we lived through the golden age of metal and hair bands and whatever you want to call it during their heyday of their Megadeth during the Countdown to Extinction tour. So you name the band that we were there at their height, seeing these bands on tour. So Jason and I we had tickets to the Faith No More, Metallica, Guns N' Roses triple bill show that was going on there in the early 90s. And that, I remember holding that ticket in my hand thinking, I can't believe this. I can't believe we're seeing three bands that we're huge fans of.
And I believe we were second row or seventh row on the floor. Yes. And then, of course.
So, yeah. Well, anything to do with Guns N' Roses usually was a disaster in the 90s. But this actually wasn't Gnar's fault. This was Metallica, and not anyone's fault, but unfortunately James Hetfield was burnt by pyrotechnic literally days, not even a week before, because this happened in Canada. I think it was at the Quebec,
Montreal.
The Montreal concert. And so the Vancouver show was unfortunately scheduled after that accident, and they canceled. I think the original intention was to maybe redo but it was never done again. And talk about three volatile bands: Mike Patton and his craziness with Axl, and Metallica and GNR just kind of being. I remember when this tour was announced, I'm like, there's no way. There's too much lightning in one bottle.
Faith No More did tour with GNR in Europe, I believe. Did they not?
I think so, yeah.
You would have people throw food up on the stage and you'd eat it off the stage.
Yes, that's right.
I remember seeing clips of that. But at any rate.
The reason why we're picking the two albums, Angel Dust and The Real Thing, is because these two albums, without doing research, that's the preface for everything here, major research, these two albums are their top-selling albums that they've released as a band, minus maybe their greatest hits albums. They're also the two albums that Jason and I had on mega repeat on our CD player over and over again in our car. So this episode is about us going through track by track. We're not going to be playing the whole song of every song, but we'll do a little snippet here and there of each song, parts that we liked or just the beginning, just so you kind of, as a listener, you're like, oh yeah, that song, if you're not too familiar with Faith No More. And we're going to give our overall feeling, and then at the end, The Real Thing, and then the end of Angel Dust, Jason and I, independent of each other, we don't know what each other's pick is, we're going to pick what we think is the worst song on the album. So as much as we love Faith No More, as much as we love these two albums, there is a song that is the worst. Now, it doesn't mean, again, for you Faith No More fanatics, doesn't mean the song itself sucks. It could mean that. But it just means if there was one song that fell off that CD and would never to return, you could never hear it again, you had to pick a song. That's what we're doing here. The Real Thing came out in 1989. This was the first album with Mike Patton. Chuck Mosley had done the first two albums. He left the band for various reasons. A lot of it was the drugs and his inability to perform or what have you. And the band needed a new singer. And it's my understanding this album, the music on this album, was already written, ready to go. They did the writing during the Introduce Yourself tour. So they just needed a singer. And Mike Patton got the music. He put lyrics to the music. So this is definitely Mike Patton singing and his lyrics to, if not all the songs on this album, the majority of them. And his style of singing starts sneaking in that we'll later see. This is Mike Patton introducing himself to the world. Interesting enough, Mike Patton was discovered while he was in his high school band, Mr. Bungle, by Jim Martin. It's ironic that Jim Martin introduced Mike Patton to the band, and it was on that recommendation that Mike Patton joined the band.
And he did, within a very short period of time, write all the lyrics.
Yes.
Or the majority of the lyrics. I'm sure there was co-writing credits to a few, I could see on a couple of songs, but the majority, I would say 98% of the lyrics was written by Mike Patton to go along with the music that the band had already created. Right off the get-go, like, okay, you have two other albums with Chuck. You bring in Mike, lyrically singing performance, and you're catching something special that, in my opinion, would not have occurred in any other way.
Yeah, and it's funny when I listen to Mike sing the songs and I hear the music on this album to it is amazing. But yeah, it just elevates it to a different level.
So I had this Sony Sport Walkman tape deck, not even CD yet.
Yeah.
Epic would have been just out, right? So that's most people's recollection of being introduced to the band was through the song Epic. And so I bought the tape at the time. And I remember going, it was a scout camp, and we're going up to Carmana Valley. And I played this tape over and over, and the whole car ride to the campsite. I can distinctly remember in my mind the logging roads, bouncing on the logging roads, and I was just entranced by this tape, by this album, by this band. Remember, we used to listen to tapes and we go like, okay, this time I'm only going to focus on the drums. And then you listen to and then I'm only going to focus on the bass. I'm only going to focus on the vocals or whatever, even though we couldn't separate the sounds, but that would be what we'd concentrate on. But I remember just listening to this album and just trying to really go as deep into it as I possibly could. It was very different. I mean, like you say, we kind of grew up with the Megadeth, the Metallica, the AC/DCs, Guns N' Roses, the Aerosmiths. This is slowly being introduced to a few other vibes. This was a very different direction musically than most of our exposure at the time. I have fond memories of listening to this tape, this album, and I can still visualize myself this many years later in that station wagon, Frank Higbush's station wagon, listening to this over and over again. So that was my real deep dive introduction, was that camping trip.
That's awesome, Jay. I don't have a first memory. Not that it didn't have an impression on me. I just don't remember the first impression. I just remember this feeling that this album brought of the different sound, the bass, the heavy chunky bass, the vocal changes, and there was just no boring song on this album. You could just play this all the way through and you're just like, this is insane. It had a bit of like fun to it as well. It was a combination of fun.
I was re-listening to these albums yesterday a couple times through just refresh my feelings about it. Yeah, I mean, there's some kind of dark feelings, but at the same time, there's a couple songs that have this real poppy, positive vibe as well. Let's go into the first song. For me, as great as Mike Patton is, the band is so phenomenal that it's impossible to not understand that this is such a musically driven, uniquely driven band.
I don't know the ages of everyone else in the band, but I assume they're all about the same age. But I know Mike Patton was himself the youngest, and he's 21 here.
I don't know the ages either. Suspect that they're a bit older. And one of the things I was reading is that Jim Martin and Cliff Burton were in a band.
Yeah.
And that Faith No More, I believe, originally, the very, very early Carnations, are like 79.
Yeah, they were called Faith No Man.
They were putting this stuff together long before Mike Patton, who, if he's playing in a high school band, if we have that history right.
Yeah. In 1986, he was discovered by Jim Martin when he was playing with Mr. Bungle before they'd released an album. They had just a demo tape out at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway.
Here we go. You put on the tape, this is what you hear right away.
I know.
Right away, you got that driving drums, the bass.
It hits you right off the bat. You are grabbed right away.
Knowing where Mike Patton has gone with his vocals, this is one of his... The nasally Mike Patton is not my favorite thing. It's not his strongest thing. So he might not have known quite then just how he was going to sound as time went on. But he experiments with different sounds throughout this album. With this opening track, if you were to think this is how he was going to sound the whole album, it might have turned some people off had they not discovered how he sounds on other songs.
Sure. And I know what you mean by the nasally sound. It was something that, as I was listening through it yesterday, I was kind of surprised, to be honest, how prevalent it was, especially on this album. I actually wonder if he or the band knew exactly the direction that they wanted to go. Not that he didn't know what he had available to him vocally. If he just sang like, I'm going to be a rock singer, then they wouldn't have separated themselves and their sound from many other bands. I think maybe possibly he was trying to be a little bit unique and a little bit different and not so mainstream.
It's interesting when you go back and listen to Mr. Bungle and that demo tape and just where Mike Patton had come from and even how Jim Martin had suggested Patton. It's kind of interesting because this singing here sounds nothing like Mr. Bungle singing.
Right.
Jim Martin knew that Mike Patton obviously was something of a force of nature as a frontman, and he certainly is.
That opening track, for me, when I listen to this band, I hear drums and I hear bass.
Yes. Billy Gold and Mike Borden on drums, who went on to play with Ozzy Osbourne and other such great acts like that. So very talented individuals.
I actually saw him with Ozzy Osbourne when he was playing drums. It was very cool to see.
We should have said rest in peace to Chuck Mosley, who recently passed away last year. Rest in peace to Ozzy by the time of this release.
Oh, Jesus.
The fact that he's still alive is amazing.
Yeah, I actually saw a little chunk of Sirius XM on YouTube with Ozzy promoting his new album, which actually it's a very solid sounding album. I haven't really gone deep into that one, but just from the parts and pieces, it's pretty decent.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. And I've listened to the parts and pieces too. And
nice to see Slash Duff on it.
Track number 2 kicks in. Of course, this goes without saying. It's epic. It's the song that put them on the map. And this is track number 2 on the album, however. And this is how it starts.
Solo?
Not the guitar solo. We won't have time to go through every part of every song.
I know.
Jim Martin's guitar work on this album is incredible.
The tone that he has, I mean, I don't know guitar tones or how to describe it, but the sound that he's getting on his guitar, absolutely love.
The part that I love here on this song is that chunky guitar work when Mike Patton's like, what is it?
Yeah, yeah.
It's it, right here. Jim's guitar. That's the song that put them on the map.
For me, to help me better to know that they are worth listening to or investing more time with is to see them live. And once I can see them do a live performance and know that they're capable of performing live, and they sound somewhat similar to how they sound on an album, really helps me know that these are a talent. And so when we saw them on Saturday Night Live perform this song, that's when I realized how talented this band actually is. That performance on Saturday Night Live is what really helped solidify my appreciation of who they are as musicians. I'm not sure if you remember that performance.
I do remember that. I stepped on you a little bit with the bass playing there. I apologize. I remember that. Wasn't Mike Patton like in the fan or something like that? The stage fan or something?
I don't recall completely that part, but I remember the music video where they had the fish flopping around
right
at the end. And then at the end of their Saturday Night Live performance, he was flopping around on the stage like that goldfish.
Yeah, I remember that. So the third track on the album, Falling to Pieces. And it opens with that bass line right away. So this song has that combination of his a little bit nasally, but then he goes low. What I really like about the song too is it's a little bit more straightforward rocker. It's got that really nice guitar part by Jim, and then he does that little bit of that singing rap that he does. It's almost like epic and from out of nowhere if you were to piece them together.
Yes, when I was re-listening, to me, my impressions of the song, I agree with all that what you said, but for me, it just kind of fell flat. It almost felt like Mike Patton was singing this too easily. It just felt like I can do this type of singing in this song in my sleep.
It doesn't challenge him, I don't think.
No, and it felt like, I don't want to use the word bored, but it almost seemed like he may have been bored singing it. Maybe the lyrics weren't quite what he wanted them to be, but they had to make the song anyways. I didn't feel as engaged in that song. It starts off, you're like, where is this going to go? The great bass and stuff like that. You know, that's just my impression. Not nearly as strong as the first two tracks.
Track 4. Now, when this one kicks in, and I'll just this song's crazy because, well, it's Surprise You're Dead. It's track number 4. Great title. Now we're hearing the Mike Patton, like, what? This is the same singer? And we're starting to see his range a little bit even more. The energy of the song is just unreal.
I read that Martin, this is a kind of, at least musically, he wrote this with his band that he was with, Cliff Burton.
That's right.
And I don't know, quite a few years old, this song. And you can kind of hear that much more of a heavy metal sound to their repertoire.
Yeah. Yeah, so this comes in, speaking of from out of nowhere, this track number 4 comes in. And if you're listening to this on a tape like you did, and like I did, we both owned this on tape before we had on CD. You know, you're putting this in, this track number 4 comes in, you're like, what? I almost wish I could see my face back then when I first heard this. So it's hard to stop that one.
It is, because the guitaring further on in the song, the way he just bounces across those strings. Sure. I think Jim Martin must have loved playing this song in the studio.
This is his lane that he wants to drive in.
Yeah.
Yeah, we never heard vocals like this. We were listening to pretty, safe songs. And there might have been death metal out there, but that was so underground that we never heard that. There's no YouTube. We didn't investigate it. We never bought an album that had any kind of... I don't even know if growling was a thing back in '89 the way it is.
Well, I guess the closest thing would have been maybe...
Pantera
or Dave Mustaine. You know, kind of within our wheelhouse of stuff that we would...
Yeah, but...
Dave Mustaine may have had the more...
When he screams out that, "Now you are mine!" That's just amazing.
Yeah.
It's hard to do that control. Mike Patton does it in a way that it doesn't bother me. I don't know how to explain it.
I know what you mean. There's other bands that,
yeah, amazing song, and I don't think Roddy Bottom plays any keyboard on the song. I don't know if it's there. I know the song Digging a Grave on King for a Day. He purposely steps away from that song on stage because he doesn't have any parts to do in it.
Oh,
yeah.
Bathroom break.
Yeah. And Surprise You're Dead is kind of like that. I think that same idea. It's not him doing much on that song. Maybe some background vocals. Okay, number 5, Zombie Eaters. The reason why I love this song so much, one, as a parent, I swear it speaks to me as a parent of young children, always being tired and being at the beck and call of young children all the time. And I find it interesting that Mike Patton wrote this song, if he did write it this way, that kids are constantly, nagging the parents, and the parents are always tired. And and he's only 21 when he wrote this, so it's very introspective on his part to write through the eyes of a tired parent. And the title is Zombie Eaters. And what makes this song so great is that it changes. It has a soft beginning, and then it just kicks into that.
It's probably, up to this point, the more mature songwriting song on the album.
Yes.
Of the ones that we've done.
Yeah.
It really feels like it's teetering on future potential as songwriters.
I love the way it's a soft beginning. Again, when you're hearing this for the first time, you don't know what's coming. And when it kicks into that Billy Gold again with that heavy, crunchy bass, dong dong, dong dong, you're just like, where are we going?
Yeah, and actually, I want to bring up the acoustic guitar. Well, Jim Martin sounds like he is pulling a lot of the guitaring sounds and tones from. It reminds me of Master of Puppets.
Oh, he was a huge Metallica fan. Obviously, he worked with Cliff Burton, of course, and
right. In this, I really do hear the album Master of Puppets, especially in this acoustic guitar sound.
So he does that sing rappy kind of style there again. It's a great transition from his very almost a classical singing that he does there. He ends, and then it just kicks into that. And oh man, just that guitar chunk they do there.
It's such a strong song.
Sorry, you're allowed to say your favorite song. You're just not allowed to pick your worst.
I don't know if it is, because I'm looking at From Out of Nowhere, and then I look back down to Zombie Eaters. And so, yeah, I would think that this is maybe a very mature songwriting. I would think probably one of the younger songs on the album would be a guess.
Probably. The contrast, again, between Surprise You're Dead, the way that one begins, and the way this one has that classical beginning, and people are like, where are we going here? It's a little bit what we'll see later in Angel Dust of the journey that people take there. Zombie Eaters is probably, if I have to say, it's probably my second favorite song on the album. But the one that follows it is my favorite song.
I know. Okay, yeah.
And that's The Real Thing.
It's a lot easier to pick the worst than it is to pick the best.
Yes, that's why we're the worst of the best. It's easy to pick the best. Yeah, for this album, the best song, in my opinion, is The Real Thing. It's one of the it's in the top 5 of Faith No More songs easily. I don't have that list in my head, but it's in there. Now, what I love about this song is not just the guitar work by Jim. The whole band's amazing, of course, but Mike Patton, the way he just sounds almost desperate at the end, the build-up and his vocal and almost like a gasping for air.
Right.
The combination of that singing, the rap rock, I don't know what to call it, the way he's able to smatter the vocals. The ending to this song is such a great payoff because you just know it's coming. So you're listening to The Real Thing, it slowly builds, it teases it for a little bit in the middle, and then it goes back slow again. Yeah.
Yeah. The push and pull in the song. There's give, and then they take away, and then they give it back to you.
So I'm going to give the climax here without any foreplay. Like, I love that feeling like he's almost running out of air at the end.
What's so hard not to ignore in their music is the way that the bass and the drums play off each other. It is truly the driving force of their sound. And another thing that Faith No More introduced to me anyway is we didn't really listen to a lot of music where there was synth sound.
Keyboard. I mean, I guess the most we probably listened to is The Doors and Deep Purple.
Yeah, so it'd be very little, and it's kind of interesting how they were able to have that synthesizer keyboard sound going on and making it feel like it's okay. It's okay coming from more of a heavy metal, hard rock, other than maybe a few songs that had piano in it, like November Rain or Estranged. But having that synth sound, that sound stage that they brought into their music helped push the envelope, at least as far as I go, you know, with my musical expanse, I guess.
If you were to talk to us before Faith No More, we would have told you the keyboard was for geeks.
Yeah, like I didn't want to see the keyboard on stage.
Yeah. What are you doing there? Roddy Bottom made it cool.
Yeah.
You didn't have a keytar.
No, those were the worst.
Keytar.
What are you doing walking around with a keyboard strapped around your neck? That looked horrible.
I guess it's the same when guitarists put their guitars down, like the slide guitar. That also looks stupid. It's like, guys, make up your mind. You either have a guitar or a piano. Pick one. You can't have both.
So, yeah, as far as, you know, being a teenager with a keyboard on stage, and you didn't really think that was a cool thing at the time. But now, looking back, he did make it cool. That sound stage really added to the depth of what they were doing.
So that was The Real Thing. Incredible song, like we said, that is my favorite on the album, if not top 5 of the Faith No More songs.
Right.
And then we have a transition to a different song altogether. This album, like most Faith No More albums, every song is just a little bit different. It has something else that maybe challenges you or takes you on a different journey. This is a very kind of psychedelic. It's perfectly titled Underwater Love because it's this weird psychedelic journey of a song.
Yeah, for sure.
Again, with Billy Gold's bass.
Yeah, I mean, the driving feel to so many of these songs is definitely the bass. It's the way the drum interacts with that bass that gives it that bounce. I don't know how else to describe it. There's kind of a bounce or a hop and a skip to this song. The synthesizer sounds kind of giving that water feeling, that sound stage, that water sound stage, I suppose.
Yeah, I love how the song begins. It has that like a bloop, bloop, bloop sound. Yeah. They really do make it feel like there's this weird. I call it psychedelic because if I did do acid or mushrooms, this is how I picture. If they did a music video for the song, I would picture like a lot of colors, kind of like a 1960s Austin Powers type video.
But for me, it has the Falling to Pieces vibe as well. It feels almost too easy, almost too straightforward. I can see Mike Patton being able to sing this song in his sleep. Musically, it's great, but just kind of lyrically, singing wise, it's almost too easy. I mean, that's just my lasting impression of it. I mean, it's not like I hate the song. I would gravitate to others well before this one. He doesn't sound invested the way that he sounds invested in other songs.
Yeah, agreed. I agree. That's a good comparison with that and Falling to Pieces. The next song on the album is The Morning After. And this is a song, it's funny, it's a song that I always forget exists until I hear it. And then I realize when I hear it, how much I love it.
Yes. Yeah, you read the word The Morning After, you just kind of like, huh? Okay. And then you listen to it and you're like, oh yeah.
I've listened to this album since 1989, so this has been on my lexicon for 31 years.
Yeah, right. It's a strong song.
It's an incredible song. If you were to show me the track listing for this album and this wasn't on there, I might not be able to come up with the title of what was missing.
Right. I would agree. Yeah. Let's take a listen.
We'll talk about today, they're the bass and drums leading.
I know. And then as soon as you hear the song, you're like, oh yeah. And then there's that synth.
Sorry, say that again?
And then the synth.
Yeah.
The synthesizer.
Yeah.
It gives you that sound stage that the band has throughout their albums.
Another example of a song that starts a little bit soft, even though the driving bass and what have you, but it builds up in its intensity.
Yes, and the second half of this song is the strongest.
Yeah, we'll get to that right now.
Yeah.
This part here.
I'm dead. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, even the last 30 some odd seconds of the song. And you can hear Mike Patton's like kind of layered vocals in that, especially if you're listening to headphones.
Yeah.
You can hear that gravelly, more dark or evil vocals.
Great song.
It is a very solid track. Very solid.
I didn't mention this before, and again, we might have some listeners to the show that are listening to our first time coverage of a band or the first time listening to this podcast because of Faith No More, or whatever your reasons for listening. The criteria that we have when it comes to music, when we pick the worst, there's a couple criterias. Number one, it cannot be an instrumental only, unless the band itself is an instrumental only band, which we haven't covered yet. You can't pick a song where the whole band is not in on it as a worst song, so to speak. And two, it can't be a cover, so it has to be original work. So the next two songs, we're not going to play samples from it, because if you're a Faith No More fan, you already know these songs, and we're not here trying to sell Faith No More to people. But if you aren't a Faith No More fan, and hopefully these samples of these songs makes you go listen to them, because I highly recommend them if you haven't listened to them outside the epic song. Woodpecker from Mars, though it's an incredible instrumental, it's not up for the worst or best pick, so to speak.
And what's interesting is oftentimes instrumentals from bands is just kind of a throwaway, but the instrumentals in both this and on Angel Dust are so strong. They wouldn't be the worst song on the album. If we were including it, often I would throw away, like, you know, when Metallica used to do an instrumental, I could just leave it. I don't want to hear an instrumental on an album of a band. It's just not my thing. But having said that, these two instrumentals, and of course we were talking specifically about Woodpecker from Mars, is actually a very strong song. And I do not mind listening to it, which is kind of rare. It would be something I would typically fast forward or, you know, skip.
It's a song that when I listen to the album, I love it. I love how it sounds. I love how the whole band is just, it really is a rockin' song. And I wonder if there ever was original lyrics or what the reasons were for not having lyrics for the song. Because Faith No More doesn't have, quote unquote, a lot of instrumental songs that I'm aware of.
And then War Pigs, I could take it or leave it. I was not a fan of this version.
No, and that's why I would say if we included the covers, that would be an easy pick.
It would be an easy pick.
We'll take away War Pigs and Woodpecker, even if it was included. And again, I just apologize for the background noise to our listeners. I've got a house full of kids and visitors upstairs, and they are just being particularly loud at this moment.
That's okay. That's life, man. That's life.
The album ends with a song, which I think it's a kind of a great way to end this album, because this whole album, as you know, is just end-to-end rockers and heavy songs and what have you. But we end up with a really nice kind of sounding. And every time I hear the song, I really picture them singing by the poolside. I've always pictured them, they really just chilling with the pool, the sun, and they're just like, do, 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 do. But what I love about The Edge of the World, even though it's slow, and I say slow, it's soft, is what a better way of saying it too. It's a soft song. It really showcases the classical style of Mike Patton's ability to sing.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and that's why when I hear songs like I had mentioned before, Falling to Pieces or Underwater Love, and then you hear what he can actually do if he was to sing a more straight song, it would have been less nasally in those two vocals, those two other tracks. And more, I wish he would have sung maybe those other songs with more of a actual singing voice that he is capable of doing.
Right.
It feels like he wasn't invested, but if he had done something differently with his vocals, rather than just kind of sing that nasally singing, and maybe approach it in the way that he approached The Edge of the World. I mean, not like the slow vibe, but just the actual singing from beginning to end. They may have been stronger tracks or stood out more, because musically I thought they were strong. I think just vocally he just doesn't sound invested in it. But anyway,
yeah,
let's hear a sample of it.
Okay. That there, it's weird. It's a really he never does that again, but it almost sounds female, like Lady Gaga-ish in a way, like a low octave female singer, and it's really done well how he controls his voice there.
Like I said, I wish he would have used more of that type of singing, approach the singing and those couple other songs throughout the album to break it up and add a little bit of variety. Like I say, it's hard. Underwater Love and Falling to Pieces, if he had just sung it maybe more of a straight up rock song, or utilized the way that he sung Edge of the World, you know, like these different vocal approaches.
All right, that brings us to the end of the official release of The Real Thing. It's gone through other releases with bonus tracks or Japanese tracks or whatever, but this is the official release track listing. Now, don't give your pick yet. I'll go first. I'll let you go last, being the guest host on this episode. For me, this was very easy. I call this the Enter Sandman syndrome. Okay. I hate it when people get mad when bands are successful. I'm the opposite. My wish for everyone, if you like a band, that they're successful. So you can see them in tour. They have albums. You can listen to them on your iPhone or whatever it is. Because when a band is not successful, they don't have an audience. You're not going to hear anything from them, right? My wish is always for everyone to be successful, or whatever band you're a fan of or artist, because then you get to see them. You get to see them perform. Epic did that for Faith No More. And it did that for Metallica, Enter Sandman. But it's a song that I never, ever, ever, ever listened to ever on my own. I don't put on Epic. I don't think I've ever listened to it on purpose since 1991.
Right.
The reason being is because it doesn't reflect the band. We showed all these other songs, like Falling to Pieces, Zombie Eaters, The Real Thing, Underwater Love. That's the band on this album. And Epic does not represent the band, though I understand that it grabs people. And there's parts in the song that I really enjoy, like the crunchy guitar part, where it almost sounds very Metallica-driven, when he's going, what is it? It's it. I like all that stuff, but that's just the parts of the song that are like actually isn't the song itself. Everyone knows that rapping part and what have you. But yeah, that's the worst song for me. And it's a song I could be happy never hearing it again, unless it was in concert.
Right. I understand why you would make that pick. It makes complete sense to me. It's kind of like you wish they never had released it as a single so that you could appreciate it more often and not have burnt it out. Like that's what happened, right?
Yeah, I'm almost envious of people that hear this album or band for the first time. They're teens now, and they don't know that as a single. They just hear it as a song, and yeah, they're probably blown away by it. And it's not overplayed in their life because they're just hearing it for the first time in 2020, let's say.
It's similar in how I feel about You Could Be Mine from Guns N' Roses. Man, what a strong song. What an awesome song. But they released it as a single. They released it on the Terminator 2 soundtrack, and they feel obligated to play it every single time they do a show. And that's something that everybody's familiar with, and they have to do it.
But every time you hear that song now, what are you thinking of every time you hear it? Terminator 2. I think of Arnold.
Yeah, I walking down the music video, and the music video is amazing.
Yeah, it's fun.
Awesome. But yeah, it's just too bad you released that as a single, because as a fan, I don't want to be tarnished by its overuse, its overplay, its connection with Terminator 2, even though it was a fun video. And I get why it was awesome to see it played loud and live. In the movie Terminator 2, I remember watching in the theaters and seeing it on the big screen. Am I remembering that, Ryan?
Yeah, you're remembering that correctly.
Okay, so yeah, seeing and hearing that song, You Could Be Mine, in the theater. And at the time, I wasn't burnt out of it yet.
Right, because we were so desperate for new material. We just
Yes. Any piece, anything that would showcase Guns N' Roses, especially loud in the theater, was awesome. But now, 25, 26 years later, I'm like, I wish it was never a single. I wish as a fan I could enjoy that song every time I listen to it, So I get why Epic it would be your pick. But when I was refreshing myself with these albums, I enjoyed listening to Epic. I enjoyed Jim Martin's guitar solo, and I always loved that guitar solo. And I was surprised by my blasé response to both Falling to Pieces and Underwater Love.
That's fair.
I just felt like his vocals, he just doesn't sound invested in the song. He doesn't sound like he cares that much about what he's singing about. I thought Edge of the World, the beginning of Edge of the World, I was like, this is probably going to be my pick. But I listened to it a couple times and I appreciated what I was hearing, specifically the second half of the song. It kind of picked up. And so for me, it was close. It was almost going to be almost right off the bat Edge of the World. And then I listened to it a couple times and I kind of appreciated more of what they were doing. Having said all that, I'm going to have to go with Underwater Love.
That's fair. That's fair. If Epic was a new song, if I didn't have the memory that I've had with that, the history I have with that song, the resentment I feel towards it.
Yeah, that's a good word, resentment. Resentment that it was so successful that you can't enjoy it anymore. But you don't enjoy it?
It's weird because without that song, I wouldn't know who they were when I knew them. And I loved it when I first heard it, of course. But then when I got to know who Faith No More is and, of course, who they became with Angel Dust, that song almost seems childish to me.
Sure. Yeah.